I had always prided myself on being a devoted husband and father. For years, I lived with my wife, Rachel, and we raised our son, Jake, in what I believed to be a perfect family. But everything shattered when I found out that she had been having an affair. It started innocently enough. Rachel had been distant, working late hours, and her mood had shifted. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but eventually a deep unease set in. One evening, I stumbled upon a message on her phone, a message from a man I didn't recognize. My heart sank as I read the words between them, confirming my worst fears. She had been seeing someone behind my back for months. I confronted her, and her guilt was clear in the way she tried to deny it. But the truth hung in the air like a suffocating weight. The trust between us had been broken beyond repair. I made the difficult decision to leave. I didn't want to be a part of that life anymore. I packed my bags, took my belongings, and left without a trace. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone where I was going. I just needed to get away from the hurt, the anger, and the constant reminders of the betrayal. Rachel got the divorce, and I started a new life, far from everything that had once been familiar. The years passed, and I tried to move on, but the scars of that time never really healed. I still thought about Jake, though. My son had been a part of the life I had left behind, but I was too broken, too lost in my own pain, to try to reconnect. I heard through mutual friends that Rachel had remarried and had more children, living a life that seemed to be untouched by the past. Then, 18 years later, something unexpected happened. Jake, now an adult, reached out to me. He found me. I was surprised, even shocked, but it was clear that he had questions. We sat down together, and as we spoke, my son revealed something that shook me to my core. Rachel had never told him the whole truth about our divorce. In fact, she had painted a completely different picture of what happened. She had led him to believe that I was the one who had abandoned the family, that I had just walked away without any reason or explanation. But Jake, as he got older, started to question the inconsistencies in his mother's story. When he was a teenager, he overheard something that made him realize that his mother was the one who had cheated. It turned out that Rachel's affair wasn't just a brief fling. It had been a long-term relationship, and she had been hiding it from everyone for years, including Jake. He had been hurt, confused, and angry for so long, but never fully understood why I left. It was like he had been living with a lie all these years. Hearing this, I felt a mix of emotions. I was angry at Rachel for manipulating the truth and heartbroken for the pain my son had suffered. But at the same time, I felt a sense of relief. Jake had finally learned the truth about what had happened between his mother and me, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. It wasn't just a divorce that had hurt. It was a betrayal of a woman I had loved, and the lies that had followed. The truth had finally come to light, but it was bittersweet. My son had grown up with the wrong version of our past, and it wasn't something that could be undone. But at least now he knew the truth. It wasn't about me or Rachel anymore. It was about him, and the chance to rebuild some kind of relationship after all those years. The past couldn't be erased, but perhaps, just maybe, there was still hope for the future. After Jake shared everything with me, we sat in silence for a long while. The weight of the years, the pain, the resentment, it all seemed to hang between us. He looked at me, and I could see that his eyes were filled with a mixture of emotions, relief, anger, confusion, and even sorrow. I could only imagine what he had felt all those years, believing that I had simply walked out on him and his mother. "I never understood, Dad," he said softly. "I didn't know why you left, why you didn't even try to come back. I thought maybe I wasn't enough for you to fight for." His voice trembled, and my heart broke. "I was trying to protect you, Jake," I replied, my own voice thick with emotion. I couldn't stay in that environment, not after everything that happened. But leaving, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought it would be better if I stayed away. Jake nodded slowly, processing the weight of my words. I could see that the revelation was slowly sinking in. The man he had grown into, the young adult now sitting in front of me, had no idea the struggles I had faced, the heartache I had endured. And even though he had learned the truth about his mother, I could tell that the damage to their relationship had already been done. "I don't know what to do with all this, Dad," Jake said. "It feels like everything I thought I knew is a lie. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how to fix the past or how to make everything better. What I did know was that I had to be there for him now. No matter what had happened before, this moment was an opportunity to be the father he deserved. We can figure this out together," I said, my voice firm. "The past can't be changed, Jake, but we can build something from here. I want to be a part of your life again. I never stopped thinking about you, and I never stopped loving you. I just needed time." There was a long pause before Jake spoke again. Do you think we can ever be a family again?" The question hit me harder than I expected. For years, I had pushed that possibility out of my mind. I had convinced myself that it was too late to repair the damage. But sitting there with my son, I realized that it wasn't too late for us. There was still time to build something new, something better. "I don't know, Jake, but I'm willing to try. We can't undo what's been done, but we can start fresh from here. No more lies. No more secrets." Jake wiped his eyes and nodded. I could see the relief in his expression, though there was still pain. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to take it. For the first time in years, I felt like there was hope. Hope for healing, for rebuilding trust, for forging a new path forward. As we sat there, catching up on lost years, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I answered, I was stunned to see Rachel standing there, her face tense and worn. She looked at me and then at Jake, her eyes narrowing with a mix of confusion and frustration. "I didn't think you two would be talking," she said coldly. "You should have just left well enough alone." Jake stood up, facing his mother. "I needed to know the truth, Mom," he said quietly. "And I found it. Everything." Rachel's eyes darted between us, her usual composure unraveling. "You don't understand, Jake," she began, but Jake interrupted her. "No, you don't understand," he shot back, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and pain. "You've lied to me my entire life. You made me think Dad abandoned us, and I hated him for that. But I know the truth now, and you can't keep controlling the narrative anymore." Rachel took a step back, her face pale, as she processed his words. For the first time, I saw her lose the control she had always maintained. Her eyes flickered with guilt, but she quickly masked it with anger. "I'm not going to apologize for everything I've done," she spat. "You don't know what I've been through either." Jake looked at her with a sadness in his eyes, but he didn't say anything more. I could see the battle raging within him, torn between the woman who had raised him and the truth he had just learned. For me, it was clear. There was no turning back now. Rachel's lies had shaped our lives for so long, but the truth had finally come out. My son was free of the burden of those lies, and though there was still so much to unravel, I knew one thing for sure. We would face the future together, on our terms. "I don't want to fight anymore," I said to Rachel, my voice steady. "It's over. What's done is done. We need to move forward." She glared at me but said nothing more. With one last, bitter look at both of us, she turned and left. The door closed behind her with a finality that felt like the end of an era. Jake and I stood there for a moment, the silence between us filled with unspoken words. Slowly, he turned to me and gave me a small, tentative smile. "I'm glad we talked, Dad," he said softly. "I don't know where this will go, but maybe it's a start." "It's a start," I agreed, feeling a renewed sense of hope. Maybe the road ahead would be long and difficult, but at least we were walking it together now. The past was behind us, and the future, uncertain as it was ours to shape. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. As the days turned into weeks, Jake and I began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the weight of the past felt unbearable. But we both made a conscious effort to move forward piece by piece as we navigated the complex landscape of truth, forgiveness, and healing. Jake had his own struggles to deal with. He still grappled with the betrayal, not only by his mother, but by the fact that for most of his life, he had been kept in the dark. The person he had trusted most, the person who had raised him, had deceived him for so long. I could see the emotional toll it took on him, and I knew there were no simple answers. But I remained patient, offering him the space he needed to process everything. I also found myself struggling to reconcile the man I had been with the person I had become. In the years I had spent away from my family, I had hardened myself against the pain, convinced that leaving was the only way to protect myself from further heartache. But now, as I sat across from Jake, trying to rebuild the connection we had lost, I understood that it wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about being there for my son, no matter what. Rachel, on the other hand, remained a shadow in our lives, but I could tell that her influence was slowly fading. Jake had stopped speaking to her after the confrontation. She had tried to reach out a few times, sending messages and making phone calls, but Jake was resolute. The damage had been done, and no amount of pleading could undo the years of lies she had told. One evening, after a quiet dinner together, Jake and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset in companionable silence. He had been quieter than usual that day, and I could tell he was deep in thought. "You know, Dad," Jake said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, about the divorce, and about how it all went down." He paused, his fingers tapping nervously on his knee. "I get why you left now. I understand why you couldn't stay, but it's still hard. I keep wondering how different things could have been if you'd stayed and fought. If we'd stuck together." I felt a lump form in my throat as I heard the pain in his voice. "Jake," I began, taking a deep breath, "I want you to know that I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I was broken. I couldn't stay in a marriage that was built on lies. But that doesn't mean I didn't care. It doesn't mean I didn't miss you every single day. It wasn't easy for me either." Jake nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know, Dad. I know. And I'm not blaming you. But sometimes I wish things had been different. I wish I didn't have to grow up with that hole in my heart." I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, giving him a gentle squeeze. "I know, son. I know. I wish the same. But all we can do now is try to make the best of what we have left. We can't change the past, but we can choose to move forward together." Jake looked at me then, a soft smile creeping across his face. "I'm glad you came back into my life, Dad. It feels like we have a chance to fix things. Even if it's not the way I imagined. It's a new beginning," I said, feeling a sense of peace settle in my chest. "A second chance. And we're going to make it count." Over the next few months, Jake and I found new rhythms, new ways of connecting that weren't tainted by the past. We spent more time together, watching movies, talking about life, and even doing small things like going to the park or grabbing coffee. It was nothing extraordinary, but it was enough. Slowly but surely, we were building the father-son bond that had been broken for so long. Jake even began to open up more about his own life, his dreams, his struggles. I could see him growing into the man he was meant to be, and it filled me with pride. I may have missed out on so many years, but I was determined to be present for the ones that remained. As for Rachel, she eventually stopped reaching out. I suspect she realized that she had lost not just me, but her son as well. The relationship she had built on lies was unraveling, and there was no way to repair the damage. Despite my initial desire for closure or a confrontation, I realized that the best thing I could do was move on. I didn't need to hold on to the anger or bitterness. It wouldn't help me heal, and it wouldn't help Jake. One evening, as we sat together, Jake looked over at me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think Mom will ever regret what she did?" he asked, his voice tentative. I took a deep breath. "I don't know, Jake. Maybe. But that's something she'll have to deal with on her own. What's important is that you and I are here now. We're moving forward, and that's what matters. He nodded slowly, his eyes focused on the horizon, as if considering my words. Yeah, he said quietly. I think you're right. It was a moment of peace, a fleeting sense of resolution. The past was never going to fade completely, but we were learning to live with it, to understand it, and to move forward without it defining who we were. What had once been a fractured family had found a way to rebuild. Not as it was, but as something new. A family shaped not by betrayal, but by truth and the willingness to heal. The future was uncertain, but with my son by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long while, I truly believed that anything was possible.